My name is Rod Moritz. I work with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, USACE. I'll be presenting to you today some of our activities in the coastal margin, a view from the Pacific Northwest. Much of what I'll be saying, though, applies to other coasts, not just the Pac Northwest. Topics for discussion. We've got aging infrastructure and risk. The Corps of Engineers manages lots of infrastructure, and much of it is 50 years old and getting older. That presents risks dealing with advanced degradation and then some of these extreme events we've been getting of late. Climate change and resilience. As the climate's changing, it's impacting our infrastructure, notably coastal water levels being affected by sea level rise. We're implementing regional sediment management and ecosystem restoration as a way of addressing our aging infrastructure. Collaboration is key to dealing with climate change, and we need to align needs, opportunities, and resources within the private and public sectors. Decision making based on informed insight. Models can inform insight. Observations need to support the models. Without good observations, we can't use the models as much as we want to. And first and foremost, we must start with good insight. Weak links, future work needs and constraints. We need to improve the framework. It's a good one now, but we need to improve it for physical and ecological observations, data collection. Non-stationary climate, like climate change, we also need to view things in the framework of non-stationary project response. Extreme events affecting our project function and fiscal challenges. Lots of things to think about. USACE is really a two-headed beast. It's a well-behaved beast, but it's two-headed. One serves the Army through military construction. The other serves our nation's water resources needs through civil works. There's 8 mission areas in the civil works sector. I'm going to go through 3 of them: navigation, shore protection, and ecosystem restoration. Infrastructure in the water resources environment. Implementation timeline can be long, 5 to 20 years. And then service life is anywhere from 50 years out to 100 and beyond. The key thing to take away here, though, is that infrastructure planned and built based on past climate may not be suitable for future resilience and operation. Another thing I'd like to note is that the economics of justifying building in climate change now is very hard to justify. Adaptability is key for that purpose. Climate change adaptation. The Corps has been working on this. We're making very good headway. We've got some things developed, some guidance documents. But most notably, climate change adaptation and planning is being implemented for new and existing projects, built and natural infrastructure. This approach relies on good policy and guidance aligned throughout agencies, private and public sectors. It also relies on good science communicated coherently to decision makers so they can make good decisions. Lead by good decisions. Tools and methods for using at the staff working level. This has to be integrated throughout. It's an organic process. Screening level assessments that will continue to be refined and evolved, and training and capacity building. This all falls within line of Executive Order 13653. The guidance. The Corps of Engineers is a regimented organization. We need good guidance, and some has been developed. Notably, dealing with vertical datums. It may seem trivial, but it's very important to understand where we are in the vertical space. Sea level change, how to deal with that. We've got some good guidance here, and if you want, you can Google it on the web. Post-Sandy flood risk recovery standard, we've developed that, and some hydrology guidance. It's in the works. This is all feeding our organic need to deal with climate change. Okay, moving on to the Pacific Northwest, just for a moment. This is a picture of an extratropical low. It's like a hurricane, except it's generated in mid-latitudes. And these kinds of storm systems affect the Pacific Northwest and the East Coast. There's more ETLs, extratropical lows, going on than hurricanes. They don't get a good name, though. It's always the hurricanes that come up, okay? But these storm systems are very similar, and they have similar effects on coastal response. Comparing the storm surge from those 2 storms, Katrina versus an extratropical low, these are just overlapped in time. It's the same kind of thing. Now, albeit this is observed along a fairly steep continental shelf coast, but it suggests that these two kinds of storm systems can have similar responses, and there might be an upper limit for storm surge along steep coasts. This also highlights the fact that we have great data collection along our country to be able to observe things during hurricanes. We've got to keep that up and expand it. Okay, when we deal with coastal infrastructure, we implement it. Now, whether it's a navigation channel or jetties or an urbanized area we want to improve along the coastal margin, we're dealing with a natural condition, highly dynamic. When we implement things, project features, to take that natural condition and channel it and stabilize it, in this case a navigation channel, we're making a big investment for the here and now. How do we keep it going? It's sustainability. Those features now form a project, the mouth of the Columbia River in this example. That project is a system for the entire Columbia River navigation. We have to prioritize what we're going to maintain and keep things locked in place because we have locked that morphology and we want to keep it. It takes investment to do that. Here's a project feature, getting battered by waves. These are 50-year-old plus, 100-year-old plus project features at the mouth of the Columbia River. It could be a jetty anywhere, it could be shore protection or breakwater, but they're getting beat. They're getting beat up pretty bad. This is in pretty good shape, but just one storm can take a bite out of it. Our commander refers to this as a shark bite, okay? But what's the threshold for dealing with this sort of thing? If we don't intervene in time, we lose the function of the feature that imperils the project and affects the system. So it's about asset management, and the Corps is working on that. Another framework is the morphology, the coastal morphology. When we build things along the coast, a lot of times there's an accretion of the morphology. It grows. It's a bonanza. Great, let's go build on it. But then nature takes its course and it starts to recede, taking in its wake the infrastructure. So how to deal with that? We just can't keep building infrastructure and sinking sand. Let's model it. Let's figure out. We have some insight, but let's get some models going. These models, which we've worked with a lot of counterparts, suggest that by placing dredge material at the blue star, we might be able to feed the morphology using dredge material that we're picking up anyway. And that's what we've been doing. Augment the nearshore littoral sediment budget using dredged sand. The last 16 years, we've been placing 35 million cubic yards of sand at the mouth of the Columbia River to sustain the morphology, and it's working. However, this action could not have been implemented based on that model result alone. We had to do some other things. We had to show observational data to some of our stakeholders because they weren't really going for it. Okay, they weren't saying, hey, you can't just float this sand and expect it to go in the right place. And we said, yes, we do. We think it'll work. We conducted a very controlled, elaborate sediment tracer study, and it did. It showed the sand will move in the right direction, feed the beaches and the nearshore morphology correctly. This was no trivial exercise, but we got it done. So now we're showing their stakeholders, hey, we can nourish the nearshore, just let us do our thing. We're good at it. And they said, wait a minute. Okay, what about the ecology? What about the benthos? Are we going to affect that area? We said, well, let's take a look at it. We're pretty sure we won't. Let's model it. We had some very good physics-based models to look at how dredge material falls through the water column, impacts the seabed. The top graph shows a lot of those metrics. In the water column, the bottom graph is the deposition resulting on the seabed from one dump of dredge material. That was within the threshold limits of some of these critters. That it would not affect the critters, is what we're suggesting. Not good enough, okay? We are stewards of the environment, but we needed to show ecological data describing the potential effects for the species of concern. What to do? Collaborate with our agencies and stakeholders to collect the data. And so we did. We worked with crab fishermen, we worked with NOAA, a whole host of people to come up with some fairly inexpensive ways to observe things on the seabed, in situ. Hasn't been done before like this, okay? We called it a cam pod with a little video camera, the whole business. Here's an example of a cam pod. You see the staff gauge in the foreground, crabs feasting. Now the deal is it's going to go pretty quick. Dredge material is going to move in, crabs are evading, and overtakes it. There's less than 3 inches of deposition out of our multiple locations of observation, and the lateral surge is 6 to 8 feet per second of sand, exactly what the models had predicted. Well, not within the limits of what the models had predicted, but this informs the models, it informs ourselves and the stakeholders. We have an amber light to go, okay? It's never green, it's amber. It's okay, you can proceed on conditions. Finally, I want to just wrap up with restoration. The estuaries are the nursery for our coastal ocean livelihoods. And so we got to protect the estuaries. The motivation for some of this restoration is that, an example, 70% of the intertidal and riparian area of the Columbia River estuary has been lost from the pre-settlement condition from anthropogenic purposes. Objective, improve and restore physical habitat and ecosystem processes. So here's an example of what we did. The top picture shows an area that had been drained. This little T channel, its sole purpose was to keep that area dry so cattle could graze on it. We restored this area, working with a host of partners, to open it up, unclog those arteries, get that nutrient-rich water in and out, and increase that area useful by almost 40 hectares for intertidal exchange. The right panel showed top, the precondition, and bottom, the postcondition. This is flow going in and out, just a snapshot, but it's like opening up arteries in the heart. This thing is working now. It's bringing in fish are going out, nutrients are exchanging, the whole business. So it's a hard assets in infrastructure and soft assets. We've got to take care of them both. I'll just finally finish with the synthesis, question our assumptions. Models are good, but they need to be supported by observation. We have a vast inventory of infrastructure. It requires us to prioritize what needs to be fixed first and then work down the list. We all need to be informed and aware, responsive to future risks and vulnerable systems. It's going to continue to roll over. Today's problems will be taken care of, hopefully, but tomorrow's problems we need to be aware of. Communicate and effectively explain our risks to ourselves and the public so they understand the imperative of why we need maybe a little bit more funding to go after some of the deferred maintenance. Interactive tools for the Corps to work within ourselves and other federal agencies. Identify what we don't know. Be honest, work with what we don't know, and work to reduce what we don't know so we can figure things out better. And then finally, we need to be risk informed. So therefore, use risk-based life cycle analysis to identify possible impacts and risks of extreme events. And that's all I have. Only just working together will succeed. Thanks for your attention.
Thanks very much.